Welcome to our next video on the spine. We're going to be talking about spinal nerves in this video. Now remember, there's 31 pairs of spinal nerves, starting at C1, going all the way down to the first coccyx. Now a nerve is a bundle of axons in the PNS. So let's draw a few more nerves in here. Right there. Let's draw another nerve right there. Let's draw a couple more nerves here. So this nerve is just a bundle of axons. Now this nerve is going to be a mixed nerve. We'll talk about sensory and efferent only in the peripheral nervous system chapter. But these are mixed nerves, meaning we have afferent signals going in. Let's just draw another afferent signal because I like drawing them. And we have efferent neurons coming out like this. So this is a mixed nerve. So it contains both afferent or sensory axons and efferent. Now, the nerve is split into roots. So we have one root right here and one root right here. This root is in the back, remember, posterior gray matter, anterior median fissure. So this is called the posterior root. And since this is in the front, this is called the anterior root. So again, the posterior root here has all these sensory axons going into the posterior horn. And I'm not drawing the cell bodies. All the cell bodies are going to be found in this structure right here. And it'll have all these afferent axons leaving. So this anterior horn's motor cell bodies. So all of these are going to be leaving. So we have our nerves. The spinal nerves are mixed, both afferent and efferent axons. When it gets close to the spine, it splits into the posterior root, which is carrying afferent in, and we have the anterior root having motor information going out. Again, afferent goes in, efferent goes out. So, the making of a nerve, let's start with the efferent axons. They're going to be leaving on the anterior horn. So the anterior horn is right here. The cell bodies are all right in there. And there's one leaving there. There's going to be another one leaving there. Another one leaving there. Oh, it looks like they're sort of all weaving together. So the axons are leaving on this anterior lateral surface. And they combine to form anterior rootlets. So a rootlet is just a little root. So right here, we have anterior rootlets. Now the anterior rootlets are going to come together and form the anterior root. So once they come together, it's the root. So here I can draw all these anterior rootlets coming together, and they're going to form the anterior root like here. So this merging into the start or the end of the nerve. Now these are going to merge with afferent axons coming in. So we have our afferent axons coming in. And this is actually the start of the nerve right here. So we have our anterior rootlets becoming the anterior root, merging with these afferent axons coming in. Do you remember what our sensory neurons generally are? They're these unipolar axons. So on that posterior root coming in, so our purple was our posterior root coming in, right here, let's just draw a couple. You have these unipolar neurons. Their cell bodies sort of stick off like this, remember? So there's one cell body, there's another cell body. Now, so see, there's the afferent neuron, there's its cell body. So these cell bodies are bundled in this structure right here on the posterior root. And cell bodies outside the central nervous system are called a ganglia. Now, here's our anterior root with our efferent neurons. Our afferent neurons are in the posterior root. And since this ganglia is on the posterior root, it is called the posterior root ganglia. Posterior root ganglia. It's the cell bodies of the unipolar neurons. So, similar to the anterior side, we have our efferent neurons coming in, their cell bodies are there in the ganglia, and they are going to go in to the spinal cord. And then we have these rootlets right here. So the root is a bunch of axons together. The rootlets, they're starting to separate so they could go into the spine. So basically it is the anterior side in reverse. You have afferent neurons going into the posterior root, breaks into rootlets. So a ganglia is just a structure that is cell bodies outside the central nervous system. So here we have a big swelling in the posterior root. All those little black dots are the cell bodies. So the axon of the unipolar neurons coming in, there is the cell body in there. Another one coming in, there is the cell body. So this posterior root ganglia is where the cell bodies of unipolar neurons. Now, you remember the glial cells? The glial cells in the peripheral nervous system are Schwann cells and satellite cells. If you're to look at this like 1,000 times, we would see there's the unipolar cell bodies right here. And around it are these flattened satellite cells. So we have all of these flattened satellite cells in there as well. Okay, so we have our two roots. This is the posterior root. This is the anterior root. For the anterior root, we have axons that are motor axons leaving the spine. And we have afferent axons coming into the spine. There is our cell body in the dorsal root ganglia, and they're going to the posterior horn, I mean. So, what about this lateral horn right here? Well, this is part of the autonomic nervous system. It's motor also. So the anterior horn and the lateral horn are both motor. So they will be efferent fibers. Now these are going to go to smooth muscle, glands, and cardiac muscle. So like the motor ones, what's going to happen is we're going to have our axon originate right there. Sorry about that. We have our axon originating, and it is going to go out the anterior or ventral root. And that's because the anterior root is always going to be motor. So here is the cell body, and it's going to be going out the anterior root. So question, which order is correct for signals leaving the spine? So if there's posterior anything on here, it would be a wrong answer. So where do signals start? They start in the cell body, which is in the horn. So this one, wrong. Goodbye. So anterior horn, what comes first, the rootlets or the root? Well, lits means little, so this one must be the wrong. This is my correct answer. You'll have to do this on the test, sequencing in or out of the spine. What is found in the posterior root ganglia? Cell bodies of autonomic motor nuclei, cell bodies of afferent unipolar neurons, cell bodies of somatic motor. It is this one. Do you remember what these two are? I'll give you a second. Well, autonomic nuclei are found in the lateral horn. So somatic nuclei, is it anterior, posterior? It's the anterior horn. So we're going to finish by talking about the meninges. You remember the meninges from the brain chapter? They're the connective tissue that surrounds, protects. And it's the same arrangement. So again, I might ask you, what is the arrangement from superficial to deep or deep to superficial? And it is dura, arachnoid, and pia. Remember, dura is durable. Arachnoid is spider-like, and pia is actually soft. They're actually continuous with the cranial meninges. So the dura mater for the cranium, it actually continues as the spinal dura mater. For the pia mater, it goes all the way down the brainstem and into the spine. Now, there's actually a space called the epidural space. So unlike the brain, this dura mater is not connected to the vertebral foramen. So it actually makes taking the whole vertebral column out very easily. So the outer layer is the dura mater right here. So that would be dura. Now you see that space between the dura mater and the vertebral arch, that's the epidural space. It contains fat. That surprises a lot of people when we pull out the spinal cord. Now, if you look, that dura mater is actually going out and makes the outside of the nerve. Do you remember what the outside of the nerve is called? That's right, it is epineurium. So it's going to form the epineurium. So the arachnoid mater is here. It's basically the same as it is in the brain. It is spiderwebby, fibrous, and it has space for cerebral spinal fluid. Remember I said the central canal, it actually starts to close as we age. You still have cerebral spinal fluid flowing down the arachnoid space. So the pia mater is this soft bluish tissue right here. Now, every once in a while, you are going to see this structure they call a ligament. It is in the shape of a triangle, and it actually looks like a shark's tooth. So they call it the denticulate ligaments. Unlike the brain, where the pia and the dura are not connected except by the arachnoid, the pia mater is actually connected to the dura mater by these denticulate ligaments. And I also want to show you this. So see all these rootlets forming the root, forming the nerve coming out, and the dorsal root ganglia is actually right there. Now, something else, it actually extends all the way to the first coxal vertebrae, and it anchors the cauda equina. So it extends from the conus medullaris, the end of the spine, all the way to the cauda equina. So I actually like this picture. It's a very busy picture, but it's a nice summary of the spinal cord. So we have our roots. We have our anterior root. We have our posterior root. It's here. And we have our posterior root ganglia, which would make these things, if this is the anterior rootlets, these things, posterior rootlets. And then we have our nice butterfly-like gray matter, central or deep to the superficial white matter. And we have 3 horns: posterior horn, lateral horn, and anterior horn. So the motor signals are going to leave the anterior horn, out the anterior rootlets, and part of the anterior root, now out the nerve. Efferent signals are going to, or afferent signals are then going to come in. So we have our afferent signal coming in. There's the cell body and the ganglia. It's going to go in the posterior rootlets, and it junctions at the posterior horn. So here's another afferent axon going in the posterior root. There's the cell body and the ganglia, anchoring in the posterior horn. That's going to junction into integration neurons that can go up these ascending projection tracts or sensory projection tracts. Now we also have the central canal in the gray commiserate. Have our white commiserate right there as well. Motor signals, let's say it's actually, you're hot, you're sweating. The motor signal is going to come down somewhere toward the front or the side. That's going to go to the lateral horn that has our autonomic motor cell bodies that are going to go out the anterior root as well. Lastly, we have our meninges, the duras, the superficial one, the middle one's arachnoid. See the space? And then we have our pia mater. So your assignment for this is to actually draw the spinal cord, and you're going to label everything. So look at the instructions on the page for today's lesson.